Welcome to the Driving Change podcast on the Evergreen Podcast Network, where we live at the intersection of neuroscience and storytelling. If you love great stories and you love understanding the mindset it takes to be a world-class change agent, then join us as our fascinating guests from all walks of life unpack their unique journeys of perseverance and passion, of expertise and experience, and be inspired to use your own story to drive change. Well, welcome back to the Driving Change podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Bloomfield. Today I've got someone I've admired for a long time and someone I've gotten to know a little bit over the past couple of years especially, and was actually able to be on his show last year, his Aggressive Life podcast. It's Brian Tome, who's the founder and senior pastor of Crossroads Church in Cincinnati. Great author. He's written several books. One of my favorites is The 5 Marks of a Man. We'll get into that a little bit later as we go. Crossroads Church in Cincinnati is one of the top fastest growing churches every year. I don't know how you guys keep up with all this stuff because, you know, there's thousands upon thousands of people that attend either at one of the sites or online. And what I really grown to appreciate about Crossroads and why I wanted Brian to come on the show today is because it's such a practical church that it doesn't, how do I say this the right way? There's no religiosity to Crossroads. Crossroads is one of those places where you come and you learn and you grow and you apply. And I've learned a lot and grown a lot just in the last couple of years since my family and I have been attending. I wanted Brian to come on because if you think about a senior pastor, you don't always think about a CEO. You don't always think about someone like that, but he is, in fact, a visionary CEO. And somebody who's passionate about so many things we're going to get into today, from his founding of Man Camp to his passion for hunting and motorcycling to the awakening he feels, I think, in his spirit about what's happening in our country and in our world. And so I can't wait to unpack this with him. And Brian, welcome. It's an honor to have you on.
It is an honor to be on, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
So I warned you in the pre-show. The first question every guest gets on the Driving Change podcast is, you know, half the audience out there or more, they have no idea who you are probably. So we want to unpack who you are all the way back to your origin story. So go back as far as you want. Talk about little Brian growing up, blowing snot bubbles, running your skateboard, whatever you were doing as a little kid. Who are your influences? What are your values? And then let's walk through that journey up to where you are today.
My name is Brian Tome. I was born at a very early age. That's the origin story. Very early age I was born. And then I was adopted, and then I had kind of a classic boy story from the 70s, you know, where 70s, I graduated high school in 83, where you were in stitches and you were breaking bones all the time, like all the time. I haven't seen the exact statistics from emergency rooms. I have to believe we could pull the statistics from ER rooms back in the 70s versus now. I never went to the hospital without kids lined up with broken bones and stitches. I go there now for various reasons. You know, someone's old or dying. I never see it. It doesn't happen. Interesting, Jeff. Did I tell you my most fascinating thing I just did last week?
Go for it.
I did a cattle drive.
Sounds about right.
It was fascinating, a cattle drive. I met a guy who owns 1 million acres. 1 million acres, has 10,000 head of cattle amongst all these different ranches he has. And so basically the ones I went to was about 500 head of cattle per, I don't know they were like 10,000 acres, the sites that I was in, or the locations I was in. And there's only 2 bad days in a cow's life: branding day and death day. Everything else in between is amazing. So on branding day, they're going out and they're bringing all the little babies, and they're giving them a multivitamin, which is my job. I did multivitamins. Sometimes I also did immunizations, one on each shoulder, and they're branding them, which I did that too. And then the one I didn't do was castrating them. Do you know why they castrate all the young bulls? Do you know why?
Let us have it.
The reason they castrate all the young bulls is because all the young bulls are all the ones that go to market that we eat for hamburger. Like there's 400, say there's 400 head of cattle, and that 400 females, okay, adults, there's about three or four bulls that all they do all day long is just mount and screw all day long. And I wish I could use another word, but I know you just like it. Use it all. That's all they do all day, every day. I'm going to mount you and screw you. They lick the rear end and they mount and they say all day. So that's their job. And then all the other ones, they don't want around. They never kill the females because the females are the moneymakers. They're the ones that are churning out the babies. And so what's that have to do with my story? Is I saw after I'm on about, I don't know, the 100th castration or so. Interesting. The first few are like, oh, this is just business. That's the way it happens. No big deal. The longer it took, the harder it got for me, actually, because at some point the spiritual lessons started to sink in of this is exactly what modern America does to our young males. We are castrating our young males left and right. They don't conform to what we want the herd to look like. They're not sedate. They don't excel in education. They fixate on potty humor and poop and boogers, and they have short attention spans. And so we're just chopping off all their balls. Metaphorically, that's what we're doing. I don't know, man. Do young boys break arms anymore? No. Do young boys get lost? No, because mom doesn't let her out of sight. Do young boys ever play with sharp things anymore and get cut? No. Do young boys? How do young boys even get in trouble? Like shaming somebody on their video games or something like that? So all that said, I'm not the crack in the current generation, but I grew up in a time where life was tactile. You were building a treehouse. You were getting stitches. You were rolling down hills. You were breaking your arm. You were breaking your finger. You were all these things on my one-speed bicycle, by the way. And I think I took that into my future. I still live a pretty active life, but somewhere in the midst of that, I had kind of a spiritual awakening, and I kind of lost my way for a while, because when you come into being a Christian, when you choose to be a Christian, that tends to be a group that's very mental and emotional, think the right thoughts, feel the right things, and not so much into the physical. So I kind of lost my way for a while, but I've kind of made my way back there.
Well, it's no surprise. I very much assumed that this start of the show would start off with a bang. I had no idea it would start off with.
There was a lot of bangs happening in that.
There's a lot of bangs. I wasn't sure it'd start off quite that way, but I'm excited about it. I actually grew up on a farm, so I knew the answer to your question.
Interesting.
And I watched it take place as a kid growing up. So I always had a little bit of a sad affinity for those folks. Never took the spiritual implications that you just did. So that's awesome. And I think what I'm always amazed by, and for those listening here, I mean, what I love about, you might look at Brian and go, man, how is a senior pastor? He's like the definition of the cultures today, toxic masculinity, that we're getting railed against in the culture. But the reality couldn't be farther from the truth. The fact that you have this passion that not just men are drawn to, but heck, my wife, you're her favorite pastor, right? She loves the fact that our church talks about this stuff.
Yes,
we bring the hard stuff to the conversation. We're not afraid to face the stuff in culture. We're not afraid to talk about this stuff because it's the real truth. And I want to unpack a little bit about, as you kind of go through your life's journey, recognizing that you and I grew up with literally steel plates in our knee pads from Sears Roebuck pants that protected us on our banana bikes, right over the top.
You wear your tough skins. Your knees would wear out before tough skins would wear out.
100%. That's what kept us in the game many times. But this idea that we are built this way, we're wired this way by the Creator,
right,
as men. And we'll get into your book a little bit in 5 Marks of the Man as well. But in today's culture specifically, what do you think is the biggest? I guess what's the biggest initiator, challenger, instigator of why we're castrating our men, our boys, especially?
I think the conversation we have around expectations is way wrong. I don't think we have the right expectations for our young males. And I could talk about the young females too. I've got 2 daughters. I got 1 son. So I'm real big on the issues faced with women. It's just the women issues get a lot more airtime in our culture, where meanwhile, men are 4 times as likely to commit suicide as a woman is. I saw one statistic a couple months ago that the men, 32% of men consider suicide every month. Okay? This is horrible, just utterly horrible. And the conversation is really wrong. First of all, you already mentioned it, this phrase, toxic masculinity. That phrase alone says a lot. Could you imagine if we started having a conversation on toxic femininity? If I just said toxic femininity, people would be outraged. What? Toxic? You can't put those two words together. Why not? I just did. Are there toxic females? Yes, there's toxic females. I don't really want to have that conversation, but I just don't understand why we're so fixated on toxic masculinity. Are there unhealthy outpourings of how some men act? Of course, there can be an element of toxicity around how a man acts. Of course, there's unhealthy males. But the way that we talk about it and the amount of time we spend talking about it, like, come on. Why do I got to debate whether if you're a man and you like to hunt and have a pickup truck that you're toxic? What are we talking about here? Men are the ones that are drinking some really foul water. Every statistic about men is negative. Every single one I've seen, Jeff. In grad schools, women make up 70% of the class in grad schools. We know in America that generally speaking, he or she who has the best education makes the most money. Women are pacing themselves and are preparing themselves to make way more money than men, which is fine by me. I wish my wife made more money than me, but they're way out there and men are being left in the dust. And when you leave a group in the dust who has the highest muscle mass and the highest frustration and the highest levels of aggression due to testosterone, you're just asking for troubles in your culture. And yet I don't see us really addressing the needs of young males. I see us taking away recesses. I see us taking away contact sports. I see us taking away shop classes. I see us removing any element of danger from them. I see us trying to squeeze them into a mold. I see us, as soon as somebody starts acting out, just put that kid on drugs. I can't handle him. Put him on drugs. By the way, I'm pro-drugs. I'm not anti-ADD and ADHD medicine. I just think we all have to come to a realization, like, really? That many people? Maybe it's just that our schools don't know how to handle young boys anymore. My gosh, I would practically get zip tied to the volleyball net when I was a kid. That's how they kept me. That's how they kept me in line. I would have been a drug addict by the time I was second grade. No question. No, if I had today's teachers back when I was second grade, oh my gosh, I have no idea where I would end up. All I'm saying, Jeff, is I think that there is a conversation we had there. And for me, back to my origin story, part of my story is this classic sort of young male upbringing. Then I had this classic born again spiritual experience when I was 15, 16 years old. And then it wasn't probably for about a decade later than that I actually was able to put those two things together, like to reclaim my physical masculine self and see it under the heading and covering of my faith. And I'm still living that out today.
So what I like about what you're digging into here is this, it isn't just a spiritual thing, because obviously we can talk about that till the cows come home. See what I did there? There's literally it's a genetic thing, right? It's a wiring, which you and I know is tied back to the spiritual, but there's a wiring that men have that boys have from the time we come out of the womb at an early age. See what I did there? See, I'm with you. I'm tracking.
Like it. You're good. You're such a storyteller, Jeff.
You know, what is it? It just must be. It's a gift, right?
Yeah.
It's that idea that then the culture now is saying that, well, it's not. It's not. It's not a gender thing. It's not a come out of the womb thing. Boys just need to be compliant. And you need to be compliant and you need to be in the box, because if you're in the box, then you can be controlled and you can serve your purpose better. And it could be further from the truth if you look at all the statistics, as you're saying. So as you figure this out, when you started to link in your kind of just the natural testosterone driven Brian and the physicality of who you were meant to be, and then when you came into alignment with the spiritual Brian and your true identity, and you started to put those together, is that when things started to really click for you?
I think so. And I think for our young boys, Jeff, I think I'm great to say our young boys should be obedient. I think there's nothing wrong with expecting and having high levels of expectation of a young boy listening and doing what he's told. But I like that word compliant. Compliant leans more towards squeeze you into the mold of what I think a little boy should be like, which is really like a little girl. just sits there and takes your lessons and does all the nice things. That's why, girls get ahead in school quicker than boys, because their brains develop more quickly. So they're able to sit for longer times than young males. So I think that having high standards for boys to be obedient, I think that's fine. It's just that we don't understand that there's other chemicals coursing through them, and they need to have outlets, and they need to be given the permission to do things that maybe some other people don't want to do, but they do, and that's how we end up keeping them. I can't remember the second part of your question, Jeff. Sorry.
No, you're spot on, because as I was saying, as you kind of discovered this on your own journey, now you have such a passion to go teach other men, especially young men, as they're coming along, and give them a head start, so they're not feeling like they're just, they're walking through this. Like you said, 32% of men think about committing suicide. We're walking with our heads down now. Like, we live in a world and a culture where a man's just supposed to be walking around with his head down, because we've been made to feel like we're less than what we were designed to be. When we were designed to have vision, we were designed to be protectors, we were designed to be providers, we were designed to be out there hunting the game and bringing it back and providing. And yet so much of our culture is, no, we're supposed to be the droopy dog. Okay, right. Yes. Right. So did you feel like, because I believe we all have different gifts and talents and callings, and not just to start this church, but when you started this church way back and helped start this church way back, I believe in 1995, did you know at that time that you were going to have such a draw to this kind of spiritual outfitter physicality?
No.
When did that start to really brew and percolate for you?
Well, one thing I did feel when we started the church, and I was 30 when I became the founding and senior pastor of Crossroads, 11 people, put an ad in a newspaper, put an ad in the back of a magazine, and I answered the ad, and they took me. And I look back on it, and
no other applicants, or is that?
No, there actually was. I was in the final 3, but yeah, I was pretty much that way, Jeff. I was a ongoing loser, because I was looking for some place to exercise my gifts and passions, and I answered every ad for my denomination I was ordained in. I sent out letters to large churches saying, hey, I could church plant for you. I could be a senior pastor. I could be a teaching pastor. Any of these 3 things would help me develop my gifts. I did everything. And in the end, the only opportunity I had were 11 people who had their own personal savings and their own home equity credit lines, who said, we'll guarantee your salary for a year, and we'll help you start the church if you want. I said, okay, good. So it all came. So when we started the church, I did have this idea of, man, it seems like my greatest moments of camaraderie were when I was in the high school football locker room. Like that halftime rah-rah, that pregame, that we're all into this together, that camaraderie there. Surely the height of that can't be when I'm in high school on a team that sucked, by the way. We never had a winning record. Yet I look back at that as like the apex of emotional bondedness and oneness and teamwork. And I realized the church should be that. The church should make a losing high school football team look like tiddlywinks. It shouldn't be anything at all. And so I did bring that demeanor to our church of, hey, we got to be in the game here. We got to call people to a higher level. We got to tell people this is a pleasure for you to sacrifice. You should be thankful that you don't get to service. You don't get to go to service for a whole year. You have to serve in the nursery because we need you back there for new people. And this is this team that you're on. You should be thankful that you give sacrificially because you're having a eternal impact on people. And we sacrifice around here. There was that sort of locker room talk that we had, and I'm talking with women as well as men. So that was going on there. But I don't think that the stuff I'm talking about right now really started kicking into gear with the physical presence of a man until it really started to take off when we started Man Camp. But we started Man Camp because I was experiencing personal renewal in my life because I was out in difficult physical environments. And I experienced that for a few years, and then Man Camp came on later.
So what is it about, and then do you think it is spiritual, but what is it about that draws men to other men, where we need that friction? Like we need it, we seek it, we desire it, and it feels so natural to just like we're around a fire, like men, we like to grunt and burp and fart and scratch and tell stupid jokes, and we can't. It's like we need that relationship And I know the Bible says the iron sharpens iron piece, right? And it's different than with our spouses. It's different than with other people and coworkers. What is it about that, do you think, that's so significant? And if you don't have it, you're missing out terribly.
Well, we're finally talking about this right now. It's pretty well said, but it's worth stating again that, the greatest epidemic of our time is the loneliness epidemic. That's the heart of the crisis that men are facing, or males rather, I would say, are facing, is the loneliness piece. And there's we've never been more lonely as men, Jeff. All the things that men of yesteryear had, they're all gone. Softball league's gone for the most part. Bowling league's gone. Elks Club gone. Lions Club gone. Even I was with a group of dads and their sons. I said, they still do YMCA Indian guides anymore? Nah, gone. Trailblazers gone. I mean, all these things gone. So what's left for a guy? How does he meet and bond with other men? He doesn't. He has these memories of friends in high school, memories of friends in college. Of course, he moves on, and then he can't keep those friendships up. And he would name his current friends as the people he works with. But then as soon as he gets a new job, or his friends get a new job, the friendship is gone. And so what you're left with is guys saying, well, my best friend is my spouse. Whenever I hear a guy say my best friend is my wife, I go, ooh, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I love that you're, first of all, as a Christian, who gets my understanding of marriage from the Bible, your wife isn't a friend. Your wife is your own flesh. It's a much higher calling than friend. God looks at you and her as one flesh. She's your own body, not just a friend. Friends, you can leave your friends. Your friends can be gone, but no, she's your own body, right? Secondly, as close as my wife and I are, there's some things that she just can't empathize with me on the way my male friends can. She can't empathize with me on meeting payroll. She's never had to meet payroll. She can't empathize with me on the draw to lust and how much energy it takes to figure out and stay away from pornography. It hurts her even to have that conversation. She can't understand it, right? She can't understand what it's like for your testosterone to go down and how it makes you feel that you struggled your whole life with trying to manage lust, and now you have none because you don't have any sex drive anymore. And she can't. All she can be is frustrated because she's still in her sexual prime and I'm not. She can't understand that. She can't understand so many. And now she wants to enter into it. It doesn't mean I don't tell her about that stuff. But when you could talk to a guy friend who has empathy, natural empathy, it's a different kind of thing for you, right? And I think that we refer to our wives very frequently as our best friend, only because she's the only human that we have any sort of friendship with. And that's not healthy.
That's so good. And I think that's what I was trying to think about this recently. I'm like, okay, why is it that you've done a great job, Crossroads has done a great job of really getting men involved and engaged in active participation in their faith and in the church, but most churches don't. And men are not attracted to the church today. And it's always been my opinion that men are not attracted to the church because the narrative they've been fed is, well, Jesus is kind of a pacifist. He wasn't really a true man. Like they almost paint this picture of Jesus as this, he's just running around with posies and dandelions in a field in a flowing robe. And he was just all he was not the guy's guy. And so I think the false narrative is that then guys they're not attracted to that. They don't really understand it because they weren't raised with men in their life to teach them the truth. And I don't know if you have an opinion on that. Like, what are we doing today in a church to let men see that?
I had to read it and reread it a couple times. I could find it for you if you want me to right now. But I was in my Bible reading plan. I was reading the book of John. I think it was just a couple weeks ago, where Jesus says, "Go get a sword." I was like, wait, that's in it. I've read that many. Go get a sword. that's Jesus said, well, go get a gun. A sword was the gun, right? I'm not telling everybody go get guns. I'm just saying he would have been labeled a toxic male for saying something like that. We've put Jesus so much in the boyfriend camp. All of our worship songs in churches make Jesus our boyfriend. Like one song that I personally love, what a beautiful name it is. The name of what a beautiful name. Jeff, how you feel like it? Hey, Jeff, what a beautiful name you have, Jeff. It may be true, but as a guy, I don't really feel like telling you it's a beautiful name. It's kind of oogie. Why don't we more major on Jesus? What a powerful name. What a wonderful name. That's in the song too, but we emphasize the boyfriend, the lovey songs, instead of the old school songs of Onward Christian Soldiers or A Mighty Fortress Is Our God, those ancient hymns. The modern worship movement is the same thing as the modern church. It's very, very feminine. And even I talk to the women like all the time. I hate this. I hate this. I don't know how quote unquote Christian your audience is, but let me just share you one of the backgrounds of my jobs. I can't stand when Christian women come to me and they say, man, I wish my husband would be the leader of the home. I wish he'd be the spiritual leader of the home. I hate that question, because what they're saying is my husband should be leading Bible studies every night with us. That's what they're saying. My husband should be this spiritual boyfriend Jesus to me, because if Jesus was my boyfriend, he would always be tender and he'd have the perfect, insightful word and all that stuff. And I have to tell him, I said, you realize I'm pretty good at the Bible. Like, I'm really good at it. And I've only led 2 Bible studies in the history of my family's life, because both time I did, all the kids cried. I just wasn't very good about it. So you keep expecting this, but realize I've led my home and I haven't had that. And furthermore, let me ask you this. If men are supposed to be the spiritual leader of home, if you believe that, why is it that you choose what church you go to? Because that's what happens. That's what happens in the home. Where the woman wants to go to church, that's where they go. And the guy kind of passively goes where she wants to go. If she doesn't want to go to Crossroads, they don't go to Crossroads. And he's like, it's not worth dealing with her. I'll just do what she wants.
Mom ain't happy, nobody happy.
Right, exactly. All that stuff. So we have the women who choose where the churches are, the women who choose who's on the worship team and what the songs are like. And you get what you structure for. You want the same things, keep doing the same things. And we unknowingly, I don't think there's been a conspiracy, but I just think it's very clear over the last few decades, we've created an institution that's more attractive to women than it is to men. There was a study decades ago that found that men in the ministry had a lower testosterone count than other similar age men in other industries. It's drawn people who have less drive. It's drawn people who just want to pastor people, which I'm all for pastoring people. That's really, I'm all for loving people. It's really critical. But we got onto this, Jeff, because we started talking about the need for teamwork and the need for sacrifice and the need for making hard decisions and tapping into your masculine roots. There's just not a lot of that going on in the modern American church, which is why every church is about 30% men and 70% women. If you're a good church, it's 70-30. The majority of them more like 90-10. Of course, no senior pastor would admit that, but you go into the average church, just look around, you're going to see 10% bulls, and they're going to be old bulls, by the way. The young ones got kicked out of the herd a long time ago, just not interested.
Right. And the old boys, the old bulls that already got their balls cut off earlier, right?
Right. Exactly.
That's a metaphor for those if you just joined now and you missed the first part, go back and rewind the tape.
No, I'll amend. There's some great older men who've got their balls. They're great. And they're amazing. They're just in the minority. The minority of men are attracted to the standard church today. And I'm not talking here about staid traditional churches. I'm talking about, 100 DB mega churches, contemporary with it. I'm talking about those kind of churches. I'm not even talking about the little old age church. I'm just saying across the board, we have a spiritual product that's more palatable to women than it is to men.
Yeah, and I think that's by design. And I don't want to say that that's part of the, I don't want to get into the spiritual battle and the enemy's plan, but I do think there's some pieces of that sometimes where, hey, that's why you got all these warriors sitting on a sideline out here.
Right.
That are built for this battle that we're in as a culture right now.
Yes.
But they got nobody nobody built to help lead them back into an organization where we're saying, like you just said, go get the sword.
Right.
Because they don't even know. They don't know where to go. So you created Man Camp, and by the way, I'm pumped about this fall. I'm joining the MASH tent for those who don't know what that is.
Oh, good.
Go look it up. I'm excited to take part in that this fall with you and the team out there. I'm impressed with how much land is out there now.
We just bought some more land. It's 800 acres?
So for those listening and don't have any idea what this is, Crossroads invested in 800 acres outside of the city of Cincinnati, dedicated to camps. It's not just man camp, there's woman camp, there's couples camp, there's veterans camp, there's camp, because there's something really, really authentic about getting away from everything, getting out in nature and God's creation and learning to hear and listen. And I think when you had that vision for man camp years and years and years ago, did you have like 5 marks of a man, right? First chapter, if I'm thinking of it right, is have vision. Men have vision. Did you really see what it was going to become?
No, definitely not. What the origin story of that? I gave you a little bit of my personal origin story. The origin story of Man Camp, which our most recent one had 2,600 guys from 41 states and 4 countries that came in just to go to Man Camp, was I was on a motorcycle trip with, I don't know, 8 guys or so. And it was in Kentucky, and it was a cold morning, and it was wet, and we were sitting around the campfire. And some guy opened up about their life and started talking about something that was significant. And then other guys pitched in on it. And we're sitting there like 2 hours in the morning. And I said, you guys ever notice that every time we get together, we have the same elements? There's some difficulty and adventure, because we'd stopped to camp there because we couldn't get across a water crossing. We were downing our bikes. So we said, we'll just stop right here. There's always something difficult. There's always something that's hard. And we always sit around a campfire, and someone always ends up sharing their life, and we chip in on that. I said, we should do something that helps other guys do this who have no interest in motorcycles. And how can we have those elements? And the idea was birthed that morning. The idea is called Man Camp, which says get people camping, get them around a campfire. And all of anthropological history, Jeff, on every corner of the globe, I can't say that enough. I'm going to say it again. In all of anthropological history, in every single corner of the globe, every single guy knew how to camp outside, knew how to poop outside, and sat around a campfire and looked in the flames and talked with other people. That's one of the ancient primal rhythms. And it's always been that way until the last 50 years. And I think the last 50 years, I think our negative male statistics, if they're not tied to that absence, they certainly aren't helped by that. And I hear guys all the time say, my idea of camping is going to days in without Wi-Fi. Oh, that's real funny. Great. I haven't heard that before. And I tell them, look, dude, understand you're out of step with all of anthropological history. I'm not saying that you have to have camping as a main hobby of yours. I'm saying if you're intentionally staying away from being around a fire and talk with other guys, it's not an admirable thing. All guys have done that for all time. And there's something magical about looking into a fire and losing yourself, and you share things you haven't shared before. That's the secret sauce of Man Camp. Not all the games and the arm wrestling competitions, all that stuff you could or couldn't opt into, but it's that connection.
Yeah, that's so good. So let's pivot then, and as we make the turn around round third here, I feel like I felt this last fall. I'm in a secular business, right? I talk about the plain glass to stained glass. It's a plain glass business that tries to really promote stained glass principles to the world. That's kind of my role. In some ways, a business pastor, right? That's kind of what I feel like I'm called to.
I like that. That's great.
And it's something that I felt a nudge in even last fall. I've been doing this 12 years. That be more bold. Like it's time to almost reclaim some ground. And I just felt like that, be more bold. I mean, our company was founded on Romans 12:2, helping people think about not conforming to the patterns of the world, but being transformed by the renewing of their mind. And then my role in it, what's that look like? And then, we come into the spring, I'm hearing it from all these different places. People are feeling like it's time to be more bold. We need to retake more ground. We need to be more. And then you come out with this, hey, I'm feeling the stirring. Of course, the Asbury thing happened last year. Now you got Baptized California happening out there where tens of thousands of people are getting baptized. There's something happening. I don't know what it is. Well, I do know what it is, but I don't know what shape it's taking, but I'm feeling it in all of these different areas and corners of my life's experiences. And then you get up and say that recently that you're feeling this big awakening thing happening. What is that on your heart? Share that vision that you're feeling right now. Maybe you don't have it kind of with clarity, but there's something stirring and I want to hear about it.
Yeah. So for our listeners who aren't aware of this, there's been a number of times in world history where the Spirit of God descends upon a region, and you see an abnormal amount of people coming into relationship with God, seeing visions of God, healings. It's happened a few times, and it actually changes the course of that culture, at least for a good bit. In America, there was the Great Awakening, the Second Great Awakening, which happened right before the Revolutionary War, and then another one not too long after, which historians are pretty united that had the Great Awakening not happened, America probably wouldn't be founded as an independent nation. But it was the awakening and people understanding you could have a personal relationship with God, which made people feel personally valuable before God and be able to fight for the rights because they were important before God instead of just towing the line behind King George. And that was the groundswell of Americans being able to break from mental bondage to the Church of England in England. And really fought for it, even though you have, obviously, in the Revolution, you have people who were not Christians like Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, those kind of guys. But man, John Adams, probably arguably George Washington, if not them, then the masses who were the troops and the farmers really had a personal conversion experience that propelled them forward to make America America. All that to say, Jeff, there's been a number of these in history, and I think we're way overdue. I think that our culture is due for this to happen again. I, along with a lot of other people, bemoan the moral trajectory of America, bemoan that things that seem to be obvious values that we should all agree on, at least that I saw when I was a kid, just aren't anymore. And I think culture's hurting. I heard Christopher Hitchens say recently, the lead atheist of our time. So funny. He called himself a cultural Christian. Have you heard this?
No.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, you know who he is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's him and Sam Harris. Him arguing more than Sam Harris has fought more than anybody to take faith away from people who are Christians and to convince people who are considering Christ to not consider it because it's not intellectually feasible. I mean, he's poured his whole life into that. Well, now he's looking at what has happened to culture, and he's heard him. He said, to be clear, I am not anti-Christian. I actually am a cultural Christian. And what he said is, culture, when it's under Christian influence, is the best kind of culture it is versus no godly influence. What are you talking about? What, Christopher Hitchens, what did you think was going to happen when you devote your whole life to telling people like me that we're stupid and idiots? And you spent your whole life getting college kids and young kids to think that the intellectually bright, smart people were atheists. What do you think would happen? As you saw adultery skyrocketing, as you saw people putting off marriage, you saw people having sex outside of marriage, as you've seen depression come on, bipolar come on, suicide come on. What did you think would happen when you told people there was no God and no reason to be accountable to anything and no higher standard? Because that's basically godless evolution. You choose what you want for you. Who cares about anybody else? It's what you want. You don't worry about culture, right? What did you think was going to happen, right? So now he's saying that, no, it's actually good when a culture is under the throes of the Christian culture. Call himself a cultural Christian. I heard it. I'm like, wow. So I used to bemoan that, Jeff, that the like things I thought were obvious no-brainers are not obvious no-brainers anymore. But now, as I'm living in this for a little bit, I'm thinking, well, maybe this demarcation that's happening in our culture, going extreme one way and leaving God out of the equation, maybe it's making for a fertile bed for an awakening to happen. Because if everyone thinks that they're okay with God when they're really not, they're just kind of playing the Christian game, it's hard for God to get a hold of them. But with the level of antagonism and desperation that there is in our culture, maybe people are more primed to have a relationship with God or sense an encounter with God than ever before. I'm hoping that. And that's what I'm trying to structure the rest of my life for. What happens if I can be a part of an awakening? And I'm structuring my job. I've structured my job behind that. That's where my fantasy life is going. That's where my leadership planning and strategy is going, is behind that.
What do you say to folks out there who just those words they felt it. They felt a twinge. Like, how do I participate in that? What do I do to line myself and my strength and talents and gifts up for that? What do you do to encourage them? What would you say practically?
Yeah, well, this is the problem, is that when most people, especially if they have some sort of Christian background, would all say, "Oh my gosh, I would love if the Spirit of God would sweep through the land and quicken hearts and bring us to understand our faulty ways and lead us to reconciliation with other and feel the presence of." Most of us will all say that, right? The problem is there's no playbook as to exactly what you do to make it happen. But if you look historically, and I've done this a lot, I've read books, I've talked to experts on this, I've developed a friendship with a guy who's on my podcast who is the world's foremost authority in revivals and awakenings, who's written a 2 encyclopedia work on all the revivals and awakenings and all the marks of it. None of them look the same, but there are some similarities that we can all work to. One, and not in numerical order, but one is there has to be a level of prayer. The Spirit of God has got to see and feel that he is wanted. Is he wanted? And you know if God's wanted if you're asking him, if you're talking to him, if you're pleading to him. For most people who are Christians, their Christianity is just a philosophical set of beliefs. It's things that they live by, but there's no personal relationship with God where they're asking God what to do, where they're putting themselves in long moments of silence to see if God actually says something to him. You know, this is why we have so many Christians that are so vehement and so all in on politics, but not in on anything as relates to sitting still and hearing the still, soft, small voice of the Lord. It's all loud chatter about their political opinions. So there's got to be a return to prayer, personal and corporate. I would say that's what you need to do. And then I think the second thing, there's at least 6 of them, Jeff, just 2 I want to touch on real quickly here, is that in all these revivals and awakenings, there's always an organization behind it. Always, every single time. And as our country has become more anti-God, and as Christians have become more anti-church, the number of people, I saw a thing with Trump's, it's well documented now, you know, a bunch of Trump's support is Christians, but you know, they're Christians who don't go to church. They're Christians who have these beliefs they believe are Christian, but they couldn't pin it to a Bible verse.
Right.
They can't do it at all. It's just things they think, and they think it's in the Bible. And they're not in submission to any church or any structure. They're just individual vigilante Christians who just pick and choose what they want and don't slot themselves under anything. You can't have an awakening with a bunch of individuals who aren't organized. You've got to be part of an organized church, and you've got to be part of a movement that's organizing itself for an awakening. That's what happened in the Great Awakening. You had people like Charles Wesley, which brought the Methodist movement because they had methods in their organization that led to an awakening and thousands of people coming to know Christ. You had George Whitefield, who had an organization for how he would preach with his own vocal cords and no PA system to 15,000 people, as counted by Ben Franklin, who was not a Christian, but he was a deist. There was an organizing principle behind him. The early church in Acts 2, the first awakening that takes place when at Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit comes down and descends like tongues of fire and people start speaking languages and hearing languages that they've never learned so they can understand what the gospel is, they were organized. They were all in one place. And there was a pecking order of leadership where Peter was the one who spoke. Like they said, you're the guy who speaks here. They're organized. That's why the Spirit came down. So we've got to personally start cultivating a dynamic prayer life, and we've got to corporately start bonding and binding together and organizing ourselves to see how the Spirit might move us for an awakening.
Yeah, that's so good. I just, for whatever reason, like the 2 Chronicles verse just keeps rattling through my head as you're saying that. If we'll humble ourselves, right, and pray and seek God's face, then it's kind of like the if then, right? If we want the awakening to happen, we got to do the if before the then. And I think that's what you're getting at, right?
What book of Judges? Okay, the Bible's going pretty well. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Joshua. There's certainly some low points there, but for the most part, the nation of Israel is kind of progressing along, doing okay. Moses dies. He has a successor who's Joshua. Joshua does a real good job all through the book of Joshua. Moses has a successor as a leader. He has a successor in Joshua. Joshua doesn't have a successor. So the book of Judges comes along, and it's just people who come in and pick up the baton and do some sort of hobnob, cobble together leadership, and the nation of Israel really stalls out. And a couple times in the book of Judges, it has this haunting verse. It says, "Everyone did that which was right in his own eyes."
Mm.
That's modern America, and I would expect an atheist in America to say that. But that's what identifying Christians in America say. They just do what they find someone to justify it or find some verse out of context. Actually, we don't even find verses out of context anymore. The average Christian can't even find a verse. They might be able to Google, like, find me a verse that say this, and you'll find something. But everyone's doing that which is right in their own eyes. And that's why we're in disarray and there's no spiritual power. And that's why people aren't going to a church. They're not going to church because the church is weak. They're not going to church because the people in a church are weak. Spiritually weak, gone, have nothing to offer. All they have to offer is political opinions. That's all they have to offer. They happen to be different than people on the left. They don't have any spiritual power to offer. They don't have any stories of how they prayed for somebody and they were healed to offer. They don't have any stories to offer of how they were silent before God a couple months ago and they felt the prompting of God to do X and they did that and their life is better. They don't have those kind of stories. They don't have any stories of somebody they've been praying for and they shared their faith with and they've come to know who Jesus is and their families. They don't have those stories. They don't have any stories to talk about how they, all that stuff. That's the stuff that's winsome to people. Not what your political beliefs are and what you think about abortion. That's not winsome to anybody.
Yeah.
It's your spiritual power and we're lacking it.
That's so good. I think that's what. Here's how I'd like us to close then. We talk a lot about the awakening and we want to draw people toward the faith that maybe don't have it, but there's a generation of leaders out there that are the lukewarm leaders that maybe they desire more. I was thinking about this recently. I got convicted on this. Is that so many times in my own life, I'm a pre-crucifixion Peter when God's calling me to be a post-resurrection Peter.
Yeah, interesting.
And you know what I mean by that? Like I feel like
I do, but I'd like to give me a little sermon on it anyway. I like that.
I feel like I've got this aggressive life personality, right? I'm a run through the wall guy without even knowing that there was, hey, wait a minute, I wasn't under the authority to do that. I just went and did it half cocked, even though I thought it was well intentioned, but it wasn't the right thing to do. And there's somebody in the authority piece. I love what you said about that. There's structure to that. And I needed a great leader is a great follower first. And so many times I've run half cocked through the wall when there's someone like Jesus who said, hey, there was a door if you just waited a second. With a post-resurrection Peter, he was there. He kind of like, he got it. He looked in the rear view and said, man, did I not get it? And now I get it. And now I'm going to lead differently. And that's, I want your opinion on that because I feel like there's so many of us out there today that want to be post-resurrection Peter in the way we lead and help, but yet be good followers in the process. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, let me build on that more because I'm a big Peter fan, right? So you're right. One of Peter's natural instincts was to be aggressive. I think that's a word that needs to be reclaimed. He was always going for it, right? He's he's first one to step out of the boat when people look at that story, the way it's talked about in churches. Well, Peter, he stepped out of the boat to walk to Jesus on the water, and he noticed the wind and the waves, and he sunk. What a loser Peter was. Everybody, don't look at the wind and the waves because Peter did, and he meant. Hey, how about instead celebrating the fact that Peter got out of the boat? How about the fact that he got wet because he was moving? Why do we crack on Peter? He's the only one who actually tried, right? But he did this stuff all over and over again. In the pre-crucifixion self, he had this natural drive to act. Jesus says, who do people say that I am? And Peter's the only one who says, I say the Son of God. The rest of them are afraid to say. Someone said, well, some say. When Jesus is getting arrested, Peter's the only one to defend him. He pulls out a sword and whacks the guy's ear off. And Jesus says, dude, I wish you wouldn't have done that. Pulls the ear up, puts it back in his head. Right. But nonetheless, he's moving. And Jesus saw him having the sword ahead of time. Jesus didn't tell him, get rid of that sword. He saw I had the sword. It wasn't a pocket sword. It was a sword, right? And then, of course, Peter does the horrible thing of he denies Christ 3 times. It's horrible. But I'll tell you the upside was he was the only one there again. He denied Christ 3 times because he was the only one who was following Christ still. He's following and wondering if he could rescue him. So he gets into all these problems, but he's pushing it. I think that's why he's one of Jesus' favorite. Now, to your point here, and connecting my point to my point I said earlier, the post-resurrection Christ, that's when he gets filled with the Holy Spirit. And now he not only has his inclination to be aggressive and take a step and take an action and move, he also has the X factor of the Holy Spirit to where people see things in him they hadn't seen before. And that's what we need to have other people see in us. They need to see us and say, man, you've really changed. You used to have a problem with this, and now you don't. You used to never smile, and you were always stressed out. And now you're not. You used to never laugh, and now you do. You used to have a problem with alcohol, and now you don't. Those are things the Holy Spirit does to us. And we need to be asking the Spirit to change us and walking with that instead of being like everybody else, just clamoring and being upset that no one's listening to my opinion and my values aren't being followed anymore. Who cares? How about allowing the Spirit to guide you and see if that is winsome to people? Because just another person shouting isn't going to get anything done.
It's so good. And I think sometimes we live bound back to that, the pre-crucifixion Peter, where he had all the aggressive in the move, and we become followers and we're moving in that direction, but we don't have the maturity. And as a church, we had to organize our men, especially around the maturity of how to go now lead. Now that the price is paid, now we go lead. And I think their awakening will be rewarded, but we have to have enough leaders to move through, right. For that to happen in our country, in our culture, in our globe. So, well, I know we're up against time here, and you've been so generous with yours already. Where can people learn more about you and things that you're for? Obviously, the Bible.
Yes.
Where else can they?
I do like the Bible. I do like that.
Your favorite book, I've heard you say.
I'm not in the Bible, unfortunately. I can't point you to the Bible if you want to learn more about me. I'd like to see you could see me in the life of Jesus, but you're not going to see me in the Bible. But places I'd point people to is I'm a big man camp. And camp guy. I love couples camp as well. It's a huge one. So you can go to mancamp.us. You go to camps.us, find out about all the camps we do. And you can just, if you're curious about articles I've written or books or any of those camp things as well, you can go to briantome.com.
Excellent. This is great. So I encourage everyone to go out there, check it out. Bring Brian in to speak. He speaks all over the place. He's somewhat funny, depending on the mood he's in on any given day.
Somewhat offensive, too.
Somewhat offensive. If you like somewhat offensive and somewhat funny, this is your guy.
I am an equal opportunity offender. And I was saying that long before other people said it, because I'm the OG.
He is the OG equal opportunity offender, which is what we love about him. So check it out. Check out all of his work. Jump in there. If you felt something in this podcast that really resonated with you, feel free to send us an email. We'd love to talk to you, link with you personally about it as well. So, Brian, as I expected, didn't know we were going to kick this thing off talking about cutting balls off, but I think we landed the plane on a really positive runway.
Yes, we did. Ball talk is always fun talk. So I'm your man if it ever comes down to something below the belt.
You're going to write another book called Ball Talk, Small Talk. It's going to be
I'm not going to write a book about my own self.
Well, we'll have you on again soon because I want to keep getting updates from you on how things are going. And thanks again for being part of the show.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. I appreciate you and all the work you do. And you're one of those value add to life guys wherever you go. So I'm thankful for you.